There is a kind of pain that a man chooses willingly, not out of madness, not out of despair, but out of something far more dangerous. Somewhere in feudal Japan, a warrior knelt alone in a silent room. The candles barely breathed. Outside, the world continued. Inside, he had already made his decision. He wasn't being executed, no one forced his hand, and yet the blade was already in front of him. What drives a human being to that moment? What had he lived for, fought for, sacrificed for? That this became the only answer left. The answer is darker than death itself, not the way we use the word today, casually, loosely, like a compliment we hand out and forget. In the Japan of the samurai, honor wasn't something you had. It was something you were. Strip it away, and what remained wasn't a man. It was a ghost, still breathing, but already dead to everyone who mattered. The samurai class, the Bushi, lived inside a code so absolute it had its own name. Bushido, the way of the warrior. And within that code, death was never the worst outcome. Disgrace was. This is the world Okamoto Katsuro was born into, sometime around 1610, in the Edo period, when Japan had finally exhaled after centuries of civil war. Peace had arrived, but the samurai's purpose hadn't disappeared. It had simply compressed, turned inward. The battlefield was gone, so honor became the battlefield. Katsuro was a mid-ranking samurai serving under a regional lord in what is now the Hyogo Prefecture, a man known more for his discipline than his warmth. He trained obsessively, rose before dawn. He practiced sword forms alone in the cold until his hands bled and his breath hung in the morning air like smoke. Those who knew him described a man of almost unsettling precision, and without question that a man's worth lived in how faithfully he served, and how cleanly he died if it came to that. He never imagined it would come to that, not like this. It started with a single mistake. In the spring of 1638, Katsuro's lord issued a directive during a regional dispute over taxation and territorial boundaries. Katsuro, responsible for overseeing the correspondence between his lord and a rival clan, misread the political temperature. He forwarded a document, one that was never meant to leave the inner circle. A document that exposed his lord's private negotiating position to the wrong hands. The damage was immediate. The lord lost leverage. The rival clan seized the advantage. And within weeks, what should have been a controlled dispute became a humiliation for the entire domain. No one shouted at Katsuro. No one needed to. The silence from his lord was its own verdict. In samurai culture, that silence carried a specific suffocating weight. Colleagues who once bowed in greeting now looked slightly past him. Invitations to councils stopped arriving. His name was spoken less, then barely, then not at all. And here is where the psychology becomes fascinating. Katsuro didn't collapse into guilt. He collapsed into obsession. He began reviewing every interaction, every decision, every word he had ever spoken in service, rewriting his own history inside his mind, searching for the precise moment he had become unworthy. He stopped sleeping, started fasting, spent hours in meditation that looked less like peace and more like a man interrogating his own soul. He was no longer trying to restore his honor. He was trying to prove he had ever deserved it. 3 months after the silence began, Katsuro made his request. Not to his lord directly. The protocol didn't allow that anymore. He submitted it through a junior official, a formal written petition folded with the same precision he had applied to everything his entire life. He was requesting permission to perform seppuku. The petition wasn't born from despair. That is the part most people misunderstand, and it is the part that should disturb us most. Katsuro wasn't broken. He was certain. In his mind, he had reasoned his way to the only conclusion that restored meaning to everything he had built and lost. Death, performed correctly with ritual and witnesses, would transform his failure into a final act of loyalty. It would say, loudly, that he had taken full responsibility, that his lord's honor mattered more than his own life. The permission was granted. The morning it happened, Katsuro bathed, dressed in white, and wrote a death poem, a jisei, in careful, unhurried brushstrokes. He knelt before a small gathering of witnesses. His hands did not shake. His breathing did not change. He drove the blade into his own abdomen and drew it across, the cut clean and final. A second later, Kai Shakunin, the appointed assistant, completed the ritual with a swift strike. It was over in moments. But the question that has outlasted Katsuro by 4 centuries is not how he died. It is why a system made him believe this was the only way to live. Katsuro's death was recorded, filed, acknowledged with the appropriate formality, and then life continued. The rival clan moved on. The document that started everything was eventually forgotten, buried beneath newer disputes and newer alliances. The system that demanded Katsuro's death didn't mourn him. It simply processed him, filed him under honor, moved forward. And that is the uncomfortable truth that history rarely forces us to confront directly. Seppuku was never truly about the individual. It was about the architecture of control, a structure so sophisticated, so deeply internalized, that it didn't need enforcers. It didn't need threats. It convinced men to enforce it upon themselves, to police their own worth, to reach for the blade. We look at feudal Japan and call it a different world, a different time, and perhaps that distance makes us comfortable. But consider this. How many systems today still measure human beings by their utility, their loyalty, their silence under pressure? How many people still carry invisible codes that tell them their worth is conditional, their dignity negotiable, their existence justifiable only through performance? The blade has changed shape. The logic hasn't. Katsuro didn't die because he was weak. He died because he believed in a system that was never designed to believe in him. And the most disturbing question isn't why he picked up that blade. It's how many of us are still living by the code that put it there.